In the early years of the Second World War, Europe was swept by the rapid movement of armies, resources, and strategic decisions that, from the outside, appeared chaotic. Yet behind this outward disorder lay another front, far less visible, far less understood, but equally decisive. It was the front of information, where each intercepted radio transmission could mean saved lives, and each undetected message could result in the loss of entire units. At the center of this invisible struggle stood a machine that the German command regarded as the unshakable symbol of its technological superiority, the Enigma. From the first months of the conflict, it became clear that the ability to read enemy communications determined not only the outcome of individual operations, but the direction of the entire war. German officers believed with confidence that their cipher system provided absolute security. They relied on the mathematical complexity of multiple permutations, daily changing key settings, and rotor configurations. But the Allies understood, unless a method was found to penetrate this system, their ships would continue sinking in the Atlantic, and their land operations would be met with resistance that seemed prearranged. The escalating threat of submarine warfare, which by the early 1942 had reached a critical point, forced British High Command to seek solutions beyond conventional military structures. What was needed was a mindset capable of combining observation, abstraction, and pure logical structure. That approach emerged in the form of individuals whose work never appeared in news reports, yet shaped the war far more than artillery fire or naval bombardments. Thus, at Bletchley Park, an unassuming estate near London, a group of specialists gathered whose expertise spanned mathematics, linguistics, statistics, and engineering. Among them was a man who would later become emblematic of this hidden war. His name was Alan Turing. By the time he arrived at Bletchley Park, he already had a reputation as a thinker capable of approaching computational problems outside traditional frameworks. His pre-war research touched on ideas that would later form the foundations of computability theory and early cybernetics. But in those years, Turing faced a far more practical task. He was expected to find a way into the mathematical core of the Enigma, a machine whose architecture grew more secure with every stage of the war. German forces continually enhanced their cryptographic measures by adding new rotors and revising communication procedures. These developments forced the Allies not only to catch up, but to anticipate the system's evolution. Bletchley Park itself embodied a unique mixture of tension and methodical precision. From the outside, it appeared to be nothing more than a quiet estate, surrounded by gardens and shaded pathways. Inside its huts and annexes, however, day and night work never ceased. Dozens of specialists analyzed fragments of intercepted communications, compiled statistical charts, tested hypotheses, and operated early electromechanical computing devices. All of this occurred under strict secrecy, for any leak could cause the Germans to change their procedures instantly, rendering months of effort useless. Turing's involvement gradually led to the formation of an entirely new approach. It built upon the achievements of Polish cryptologists who, before the war, had come close to understanding the machine's structure. Their breakthroughs, shared with the British in 1939, served as a starting point. Yet with Germany constantly increasing the Enigma's complexity, mere adaptation was insufficient. What was required was an entirely new instrument. By 1941, it became evident that the struggle to unlock the Enigma had become a race between time and technical innovation. German submarines continued to inflict heavy losses on Allied shipping, and each day of delay cost dozens of vessels. Breaking the cipher was no longer a purely mathematical ambition. It was a matter of strategic survival. At this turning point, Turing began developing a device that would eventually become decisive. His ideas relied on probabilistic models, analysis of typical operator errors, recurring message structures, and logical constructions that eliminated impossible configurations. Gradually, these insights coalesced into a method that could transform scattered signals into a discernible pattern. Outside Bletchley Park, few could imagine that within its quiet rooms, a tool was being born that would alter the balance of the entire conflict. Even fewer realized that the successes achieved there would remain hidden from the public for decades. While the world saw only the chaos of war, within this estate an invisible battle unfolded. A battle of intellect against a cipher considered unbreakable. And it was here that the story of a silent victory began. By early 1941, work at Bletchley Park entered a new phase. Intercepted German messages accumulated faster than specialists could analyze them. Despite the efforts of dozens of cryptographers, the volume of incoming data reached proportions that threatened to overwhelm the entire system. It became evident that manual analysis alone could no longer keep pace with the growing complexity of the German cipher. German forces expanded their areas of operation, and U-boats continued their nearly unrestricted activity in the Atlantic. The daily key changes of the Enigma occurred at such speed that any delay rendered previous efforts useless. Under these conditions, Alan Turing formulated an idea that would turn cryptography into a mechanized discipline. His concept centered on creating a device capable of testing multiple Enigma configurations at a speed unattainable by human calculation. This idea did not appear suddenly. Rather, it was the natural evolution of the mathematical principles he had contemplated before the war. His theoretical understanding of how computation could be formalized became the foundation for a practical solution, one that could be applied directly to the problem of reading German codes. The first sketches of the machine included a network of electrical circuits, rotating drums, and logical linkages. The device would simulate the behavior of Enigma's rotors while eliminating impossible combinations, narrowing the search to a manageable set. This meant that instead of analyzing millions of potential sequences, cryptographers could focus on a limited number of plausible keys. The task ceased to be a purely mathematical exercise. It became a structured algorithmic process. Soon, the device received its working name, the bomb. The term had existed in earlier Polish designs, yet the British version grew into a far more powerful and complex mechanism. Creating it required collaboration between engineers, experts in electromechanics, and technicians experienced in radio interception. Every component had to function with precision and withstand long hours of continuous operation, as even a brief malfunction could cost the team critical time. By autumn 1941, the first British bombe was ready for testing. It was a large machine, with rows of rotating drums turning at high speed and producing a constant mechanical hum. Behind the simple appearance of its motion lay an intricate logical procedure that systematically eliminated incorrect possibilities. Operators monitored its progress, recording the surviving combinations for deeper analysis. Almost immediately, the bomb demonstrated its transformative potential. Each discovered configuration opened access to the structure of German messages for the given day. This gave the Allies insight into U-boat routes, minefield plans, and changes in tactical orders. With such information, convoys could be redirected away from danger zones, reducing losses that had previously been unavoidable. Although the bomb was not a universal solution, its arrival marked the moment when the balance of the cryptographic war began to shift. For the first time in many months, analysts sensed that the German system was not invulnerable. Bletchley Park was transitioning from passive decoding attempts to active influence on the outcome of the maritime conflict. This transformation became possible through the combination of mathematical reasoning and engineering innovation. Later, this period would be remembered as the foundation upon which greater victories were built. But at the time, those working at Bletchley Park saw only an endless stream of intercepted signals and the constant urgency of their task. Every successful day meant another opportunity to to save ships and lives. And at the center of it all stood a method born from logic, perseverance, and the search for structure within the complexity of the German cipher. By the beginning of 1942, the work at Bletchley Park had developed into a rhythm that combined the intensity of frontline operations with the precision of scientific research. Even with the introduction of the first machines capable of speeding up the analysis of German codes, the volume of intercepted communications continued to grow. Radio stations captured new messages daily, and each one carried potential value if the key could be found in time. But as German operators regularly updated their encryption procedures and command structures introduced new security measures, the task became increasingly complex. The situation in the Atlantic was especially severe. German U-boats, operating in coordinated groups, inflicted heavy losses on Allied convoys. Merchant ships were sunk in rising numbers, threatening essential supply routes. Within the British Admiralty, it became clear that without precise information on submarine movements, no defensive strategy could remain effective. This placed even greater weight on the cryptographic work at Bletchley Park, which gradually became the backbone of maritime intelligence. During these months, the bombs operated without pause, processing ever-growing amounts of intercepted material. New machines were installed in specially prepared rooms where the heat generated by constantly running motors raised the temperature to uncomfortable levels. The continuous sound of spinning drums became part of the daily environment for operators and cryptographers alike. To many workers, the devices appeared as complex mechanical constructions. To Alan Turing, they represented a physical embodiment of the logical structures he had begun formulating long before the war. As the bombs increased their output, their results extended beyond isolated successful decryptions. Analysts began identifying recurring patterns in U-boat behavior, preferred patrol routes, typical regrouping points, and shifts in operational tactics. This information allowed Allied command to form risk maps and reroute convoys before danger materialized. Although the threat was not eliminated, the unpredictability that once favored the German submarines began to diminish. The continued success of these operations depended heavily on secrecy. The German command had to remain unaware that their communications were being read. If the Allies used decrypted information too directly, it could alert German cryptographers, triggering immediate protocol changes. Therefore, only a limited portion of the intelligence could be acted upon openly. On certain occasions, Allied command allowed minor losses to occur to preserve the secrecy of their cryptographic breakthrough. Though difficult, such decisions were considered necessary for long-term strategic advantage. As 1942 progressed, cooperation between British and American cryptographic teams also increased. The United States began producing its own bombs, which helped distribute the growing workload and accelerate the processing of German naval communications. This collaboration strengthened the Allied ability to respond swiftly to changes in German procedures, creating a more resilient intelligence infrastructure. By the spring of 1942, initial strategic shifts became visible. Loss rates among Allied convoys began to stabilize, and in some areas of the Atlantic conditions even improved. It was not yet a decisive turning point, but it offered the first signs that the tide could be reversed. The staff at Bletchley Park understood that their work had contributed to this improvement, even if the broader world knew nothing of their efforts. Nevertheless, the pressure increased as German command introduced new rotors and additional settings for the Enigma. Each change temporarily disrupted decryption and forced the cryptographers to revise their methods and update the bombs. For weeks at a time, the entire operation focused on regaining lost ground. Yet, the overall trend remained clear. The techniques pioneered by Turing and his colleagues were evolving into a stable and indispensable system of wartime intelligence. Their work was a quiet victory. Its impact felt far beyond the walls of the estate. It did not resemble a sudden breakthrough, but rather a persistent, growing force that steadily weakened the enemy's advantage in the Atlantic. By mid-1942, the work at Bletchley Park had evolved into a multi-layered system in which analysts, engineers, operators, statisticians, and radio specialists worked in a shared rhythm. This structure required constant expansion as German command intensified security measures, introduced new cipher variations, and increased the number of different encrypted communications. All of this unfolded alongside the broadening scope of military operations on land, at sea, and in the air. Every new campaign, regardless of its geographic location, generated additional transmissions that needed to be intercepted, classified, and, if possible, deciphered. The war was becoming not only a contest of armies, but a contest of information streams. One of the most significant shifts came with the introduction of a new version of the Enigma used exclusively by German naval forces. This development meant a redesign of daily key structures, new protective mechanisms, and a separate system of distributing settings among U-boats. The consequences were felt almost immediately. The number of readable messages declined sharply, and gaps began to appear in the intelligence picture. In the Atlantic, where shipping lanes remained vital for Europe's supply, the change led to renewed losses among convoys. The British Admiralty once again faced a strategic threat capable of altering the course of the war at sea. Under these conditions, the burden on Bletchley Park intensified. A new set of methods had to be developed to regain access to this updated naval cipher. Mathematicians and engineers, including the team working under Alan Turing, and specialists familiar with naval communications, began studying every available clue about the new system. They examined the structure of messages, the equipment used on U-boats, and standard transmission procedures. With limited initial data, the foundation of the effort was probability-based analysis that allowed analysts to search for structural patterns in the altered code. Human error also played a crucial role. Despite training, German operators frequently repeated familiar text formulas or made predictable mistakes in message construction. These details were not immediately obvious, yet when studied systematically, they provided critical leverage. Patterns of operator behavior, combined with the technical specifics of the new Enigma model, allowed analysts to form preliminary hypotheses about its internal configurations. These hypotheses were then transferred to the engineering teams, who built new logical components to supplement existing bombs. Adapting the machines presented not only an intellectual challenge but a physical one as well. The updated bombs required more space, more power, and more maintenance. New huts were constructed to house the growing number of devices, and the workforce at Bletchley Park expanded rapidly. Many newly arrived employees were unaware of the full scope of the mission and performed only specialized tasks related to their specific station. Despite the fragmented nature of their work, this system ensured the capacity needed to keep up with the expanding cryptographic front. By autumn 1942, the first results began to appear. The enhanced bombs succeeded in finding keys for select days, restoring partial access to naval traffic. Although this did not provide complete control over U-boat communications, it offered valuable insights that allowed analysts to detect shifting patrol areas, command directives, and logistical instructions. Even limited intelligence enabled Allied naval forces to take targeted actions, reducing uncertainty in the most dangerous regions of the Atlantic. At the same time, Bletchley Park expanded its work across other German communication systems. Luftwaffe operations used their own cipher variations, and land forces operating in North Africa under General Rommel employed different procedures with unique characteristics. The estate gradually transformed into a central analytical environment where every front generated its own intelligence flow. Coordination among the various teams became essential, and internal systems for managing information were developed to meet this need. Despite the growing pressure, the staff remained committed to a unified purpose: regaining control over enemy communications. During these months, Bletchley Park's guiding philosophy fully took shape: adaptability, methodical rigor, and continuous improvement. This approach was necessary because German cryptography kept evolving, and each new stage demanded a technical and intellectual response. This ongoing struggle became the foundation for the breakthroughs that would soon change the balance of the entire conflict. By early 1943, the situation in the Atlantic began to shift. Although German U-boats remained a formidable threat, the scale of their successes noticeably declined. This change resulted from several converging efforts: strengthened convoy escorts, the introduction of improved radar systems, and, most critically, the systematic decryption of German naval communications. Among these factors, the intelligence produced at Bletchley Park became one of the most valuable contributions to the ongoing struggle for control over the ocean. After months of intensive work, the upgraded bombs reached a level at which they could regularly recover keys for a significant portion of U-boat traffic. This restored access to movement orders, rendezvous coordinates, operational reports, and command messages. Each fragment of decrypted material formed part of a broader analytical picture. As a result, Allied Naval Command gained the ability to redirect convoys long before they reached dangerous zones. The menace was not eliminated, but the level of uncertainty had decreased dramatically. At the same time, German Naval Command continued adjusting its tactics. U-boats increasingly relied on night attacks and exploited adverse weather conditions to conceal their maneuvers. Yet these tactical shifts became less effective once Allied analysts began receiving regular intelligence. With advanced warning, convoys could be reinforced at key points or diverted when necessary. This flexibility was made possible largely due to consistent cryptographic insight. A central principle during this period was the preservation of secrecy. Any operation that too clearly reflected inside knowledge of German communication patterns could alert the enemy and cause immediate changes to the cipher system. Therefore, Allied Command had to select operations carefully, sometimes refraining from acting directly on decrypted information. On rare occasions, minor losses were accepted to avoid any indication that Enigma ciphers had been penetrated. As difficult as these decisions were, they ensured long-term intelligence, continuity, and prevented disastrous shifts in German cryptographic procedures. Transatlantic cooperation grew increasingly important. American specialists, equipped with their own versions of the bomb, joined the workload, significantly increasing processing capacity. With several centers operating in parallel, the Allies could react more quickly to German procedural changes. This distributed approach created a robust intelligence framework capable of withstanding the intensifying pace of wartime communication. By spring 1943, German command began noticing a sharp rise in U-boat losses. These figures caused concern, yet German cryptographers attributed the setbacks to improved Allied technology and heavier convoy escorts. They did not suspect that their communication system had been compromised. This misunderstanding allowed Allied analysts to continue their work without fear of sudden procedural reforms. Decryptions accumulated steadily, guiding naval responses and providing vital data for broader strategic decisions. By the summer of 1943, a clear trend had emerged. For the first time in years, the Allies had gained a consistent advantage in the Atlantic. This achievement did not appear as a single dramatic reversal, but as the result of accumulated intelligence and coordinated adaptation. At the heart of this progress stood the cryptographic effort at Bletchley Park, carried out far from the ocean, but shaping the course of the naval war with decisive precision. Their work restored control over the Atlantic supply routes and created the conditions necessary for the large-scale operations that would follow. By late 1943, the intelligence emerging from Bletchley Park had become an essential element of Allied strategic planning. Military headquarters were preparing operations whose scale surpassed anything previously attempted. For these undertakings to succeed, they required accurate and timely information on enemy activity. The cryptographic center, though concealed from public view and from most of the armed forces, became one of the critical pillars supporting these plans. Many high-level decisions were based on data produced quietly in rooms filled with the constant noise of electromechanical machines. Among the most important areas of focus were operations across continental Europe. German forces strengthened their defensive positions, constructing fortified lines and anticipating future Allied offensives. These preparations generated a substantial volume of radio traffic, including orders, engineering reports, and logistical instructions. Although various cipher systems were used across different branches of the German military, a significant portion of these communications still passed through the Enigma. This gave analysts the opportunity to learn about troop movements, defensive construction, resource allocation, and shifts in operational planning. Handling such information required exceptional precision. Every decrypted message became part of a larger analytical framework, demanding careful correlation with other pieces of intelligence. Within Bletchley Park, specialized units focused on specific categories: operational reports, statistical patterns, technical aspects of German communication networks. Distributing tasks in this way ensured efficiency even as the volume of intercepted material continued to grow. Intelligence concerning Germany's transportation networks and supply capabilities was of particular importance. Large-scale operations depended on understanding how quickly German units could be redeployed and where their logistical vulnerabilities lay. Thanks to decrypts, Allied planners could estimate how the enemy might respond to an offensive and could design operations to exploit delays or weaknesses. This allowed the Allies to seek maximum effect while minimizing their own losses. At the same time, cryptographers continued working on naval communications. Although the central threat in the Atlantic had diminished, U-boats still possessed the capacity to disrupt supply lines if their operations went undetected. The bombs therefore continued running day and night. Even with reduced intensity of attacks, maintaining intelligence dominance remained essential. Secure maritime routes were vital for transporting troops, equipment, and supplies for the large operations being prepared on the European mainland. During this period, cooperation between British and American analytical centers grew even stronger. The exchange of data and parallel decryption efforts created redundancy and significantly reduced the time needed to process intercepted messages. This collaboration ensured that intelligence analysis did not depend on a single facility or individual team. Instead, it evolved into a synchronized multinational system, improving accuracy and reducing the risk of operational blind spots. For many at Bletchley Park, understanding the true scale of their contribution remained difficult. They saw the growing demands, the relentless workload, and the constant pressure to keep pace with German communication changes. Yet they rarely knew how their decrypted messages translated into strategic decisions or battlefield outcomes. Even so, most workers recognized that their labor supported operations of enormous significance and helped shorten the war's duration. By this stage of the conflict, the cryptographic front had firmly become the hidden foundation on which Allied offensive plans were built. The intelligence produced at Bletchley Park was no longer simply useful, it was indispensable. It allowed commanders to act with clarity, anticipate enemy decisions, and prepare for operations that would soon determine the fate of the European theater. By the summer of 1944, the cryptographic work carried out at Bletchley Park had reached a level at which its influence became decisive for the closing stages of the war. Although the staff continued their work in strict secrecy, far removed from the front lines, the intelligence they produced shaped strategic planning at the highest levels. German command transmitted vast quantities of radio traffic in an effort to maintain control over increasingly complex military situations. For the Allies, every intercepted message represented a potential advantage, provided it could be read in time. Large-scale operations unfolding throughout 1944 demanded uninterrupted analysis. German forces reinforced defensive lines, adjusted supply routes, and redeployed units in response to the shifting conditions on multiple fronts. These changes generated a continuous stream of communications, much of which still passed through Enigma networks. Decrypted transmissions enabled analysts to monitor these developments with exceptional precision. As a result, Allied planners could refine their strategies, reduce the risks associated with offensive maneuvers, and concentrate resources where they would have the greatest impact. This intelligence shaped not only ground operations, but also those in the air and at sea. Decrypts related to the Luftwaffe provided timely information about aircraft readiness, airfield conditions, and shifts in deployment. At sea, decrypted naval messages ensured that the remaining German U-boats could be tracked more effectively, preventing them from disrupting the crucial supply lines that supported Allied operations. Together, these elements created a unified intelligence picture that allowed Allied command to coordinate its strategy across multiple theaters. Even as Allied forces advanced, the need for intelligence did not diminish. During active offensives, it became vital to understand how German forces were reacting, what reinforcements they were moving, which defensive positions they were strengthening, and where they were beginning to show signs of strain. Analysts at Bletchley Park processed this information continuously, ensuring that commanders received updates quickly enough to adapt their decisions to the evolving situation. The speed of internal communication within the cryptographic center and the efficiency of distribution networks to battlefield headquarters reached a level that allowed decrypted information to be used with minimal delay. Despite the growing importance of their work, the personnel of Bletchley Park remained bound by exceptionally strict secrecy rules. Most military officers and soldiers who benefited from decrypted intelligence knew nothing about its origin. This concealment was necessary, as any indication that the Enigma system had been compromised could lead German cryptographers to implement drastic changes. Instead, thousands of individuals continued their work quietly, aware that their contributions would remain unrecognized for an indefinite period. For many, this sense of anonymity was overshadowed by the belief that their efforts shortened the war and reduced the human cost. By 1945, the role of decrypted intelligence became even more pronounced. As German forces struggled to maintain cohesion, they relied heavily on radio communications. The resulting influx of intercepted messages expanded the workload, but Bletchley Park had, by then, developed the capacity to process it. Dozens of bombs operated simultaneously, supported by a large network of analysts, clerks, technicians, and auxiliary personnel. This infrastructure ensured that Allied command maintained near-continuous awareness of German strategic intentions, logistical challenges, and operational weaknesses. It became an invaluable tool that allowed the Allies to accelerate their offensive and anticipate enemy reactions. When the conflict in Europe eventually came to an end, many participants attributed the outcome to the numerical and technological superiority of Allied forces. Yet within the upper echelons of command, it was well understood that victory had been hastened by the ability to read enemy communications. Without the sustained efforts of cryptographers, analysts, and engineers, the war might have lasted far longer and resulted in far greater losses. Still, the details of Bletchley Park's role remained classified, concealed behind layers of official secrecy. Even those who had worked there could not speak openly of their contribution. Alan Turing, one of the principal architects of this hidden triumph, continued his scientific work in the post-war years. However, the full extent of his wartime contributions remained unknown to the public for decades. Only then did the world begin to understand that the breaking of the Enigma had not merely influenced the conflict, it had fundamentally altered its trajectory, saving countless lives by hastening its end. It was a victory without parades or public acclaim. It was built through long nights, the steady hum of machines, relentless mathematical analysis, and unwavering discipline. It was a victory of intellect over a system once believed unbreakable, and for that reason, it remains one of the quietest yet most consequential triumphs in modern history.